The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the velvet expanse of space, their light cascading over the sleek, metallic hull of a massive alien warship. The vessel belonged to the Zorathian Empire, an advanced civilization known for its dazzling technology and intricate societal customs. At the heart of this empire stood Princess Elara Valkyrin, a figure who was as much a legend among her people as she was an enigma. Her beauty was unparalleled. Hair like spun silver that cascaded down her back in waves, eyes that glowed faintly with an ethereal violet hue, and skin so flawless it seemed almost crystalline under certain lights. But beyond her striking appearance lay a sharp intellect and fierce determination, qualities that had earned her both admiration and respect within the royal court. Elara's life, however, was far from ordinary. She wasn't just any princess, she was heir to one of the most powerful thrones in the galaxy. Raised amidst opulence and privilege, she had been groomed since birth to lead her people through diplomacy or battle if need be. Yet, despite her regal upbringing, Elara possessed a rebellious streak that often clashed with tradition. It was this defiance that led her into many daring escapades, including the infamous wager that would change everything. The bet itself happened during a diplomatic summit aboard her father's flagship, where representatives from various species gathered to negotiate trade agreements and alliances. Among them was Captain Rylan Drake, a human soldier whose reputation preceded him across star systems. Known for his cunning strategies and unyielding bravery, Rylan commanded a small but highly effective fleet tasked with defending Earth's interests on the galactic stage. His presence at the summit was unexpected yet intriguing, a bold move by humanity to assert itself among older, more established civilizations. Rylan wasn't your typical military man. Tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. His rugged features bore scars earned in countless battles, each telling a story of survival and resilience. Unlike many humans who tried too hard to impress alien dignitaries, Rylan remained refreshingly grounded, speaking plainly without pretense. This authenticity caught Elara off guard, sparking a curiosity about Earthlings she hadn't anticipated. It all began innocently enough, a casual conversation between two vastly different beings over shared drinks, well, simulated ones for Elara. They debated tactics, philosophies, even cultural quirks, their banter growing increasingly spirited as the evening wore on. Eventually, egos flared, and the challenge emerged. Whoever lost a simulated combat simulation later that night would have to surrender something significant. For Rylan, it meant giving up command privileges for a week, a daunting prospect given his responsibilities. For Elara, well, she agreed to terms without fully considering what might follow. Neither could have predicted how events unfolded after the simulation ended. As the results flashed across the screen, showing Rylan victorious by a narrow margin, gasps rippled through the assembled crowd. Even Elara looked stunned, though whether from disbelief or shock at losing remained unclear. The stakes suddenly felt heavier than either had imagined. What started as playful rivalry now carried consequences neither dared ignore. Back aboard her private quarters later that night, Elara replayed the simulation in her mind, dissecting every decision, every misstep. How had she underestimated him? Sure, Rylan's tactical brilliance shone brightly, but there was something else, something instinctual driving his choices. Perhaps it was his humanity, raw and unpredictable, clashing beautifully against her methodical approach. Whatever it was, it gnawed at her pride while stirring emotions she struggled to name. Meanwhile, Rylan paced his cabin, grappling with his own thoughts. He hadn't entered the bet seeking power or leverage over a princess. Heck, he barely understood half the implications tied to such a victory. Still, as reality settled in, questions swirled around him. What did sharing a bed truly mean in Zorathian culture? Was it purely symbolic, or did deeper undertones exist beneath the surface? And perhaps most troubling of all, why did the idea unsettle him less than it probably should? As fate would weave its threads tighter, neither knew how profoundly these moments would alter not only their lives but also the fragile balance of interstellar relations teetering precariously on the brink. Little did they realize, the universe had plans grander than mere bets or fleeting victories, and their paths were destined to collide in ways neither could foresee. Captain Rylan Drake sat alone in his modest cabin aboard the human frigate Eclipse, staring blankly at the holographic display hovering above his desk. The words, "simulation results," "human victory," blinked mockingly before him, taunting him with their simplicity. Victory. Such a small word to carry such monumental weight. He ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, exhaling sharply. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the stirrings of guilt, not because he'd won, but because he couldn't shake the image of Alara's face when the results came in. Her violet eyes had widened slightly, lips parted as though preparing to protest, only to close again in silent acceptance. It was pride wounded, yes, but also something else, something unreadable that lingered in her expression long after the crowd dispersed. Rylan wasn't naive enough to believe winning a combat simulation against an alien princess was purely a matter of skill. Luck always played its part, and tonight, fortune had favored him. Still, he couldn't deny feeling a flicker of satisfaction knowing he'd outmaneuvered someone renowned for their strategic genius. Yet, that satisfaction soured quickly when he considered the stakes. Sharing a bed with Alara Valkyrin wasn't just some quirky forfeit, it was a cultural landmine waiting to explode. Humans and Zorathians didn't exactly share a history of mutual understanding, let alone intimacy. The thought made his stomach churn with unease. He leaned back in his chair, tilting his head toward the ceiling as if searching for answers etched in the metal panels above. What did sharing a bed even mean in Zorathian terms? Was it literal or metaphorical? Symbolic of submission? Or worse, some bizarre ritual involving ancient traditions he wouldn't begin to comprehend? His mind spiraled through possibilities, each more absurd than the last. Maybe it involved ceremonial robes or incense-heavy ceremonies conducted under strange constellations. Heck, maybe it required him to sing ballads in broken Zorathian while balancing on one foot. Anything seemed possible with these aliens. Then there was the practical side of things. Diplomatic scandals loomed large in his imagination. If word got out about this arrangement, and it would, the fallout could ripple across galaxies. Earth's fragile alliances hung by threads thinner than spider silk, and tossing fuel onto the fire of xenophobic tensions wasn't exactly career-enhancing behavior. He groaned aloud, rubbing his temples. Why hadn't he stuck to safer bets, like arm wrestling or trivia contests? Across the void separating their respective ships, Princess Alara wrestled with her own turmoil. Seated cross-legged on the floor of her opulent chamber, she stared at the glowing orb suspended midair, a relic gifted to her by her late mother, said to reflect one's truest emotions. Tonight, it pulsed erratically, shifting colors between angry reds and contemplative blues. She scowled at it, as though blaming the artifact for her predicament. Losing to Rylan Drake stung, not because she cared about the simulation itself, but because it revealed vulnerabilities she preferred to keep hidden. Vulnerabilities like impulsiveness, pride, stubbornness. I should never have agreed, she muttered under her breath, tossing a plush cushion across the room in frustration. It hit the wall with a soft thud, joining several others already littering the floor. Her advisor, Tranix, a wiry Zorathian elder with translucent skin and perpetually raised eyebrows, hovered nearby, offering cautious counsel. "Perhaps this is an opportunity, Your Highness," Tranix ventured diplomatically, his voice smooth as polished stone. "To learn from the humans, understand their ways." Alara shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "An opportunity? You think being forced into whatever this entails is an opportunity?" Tranix inclined his head respectfully, unfazed by her ire. "Not all lessons are pleasant, my lady. Sometimes, growth comes from discomfort." She snorted, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. Growth, indeed. What kind of lesson could possibly come from lying in bed next to a human soldier who probably didn't even know how to pronounce her full title correctly? The very notion was laughable. Except, wasn't it? There was no denying Rylan intrigued her. Not in the way suitors typically did, with flowery compliments and rehearsed gestures, but in a raw, unfiltered manner that challenged her preconceptions. He didn't fawn over her status or tiptoe around her authority. Instead, he met her gaze head-on, spoke plainly, and treated her like an equal rather than a deity. It was infuriating, refreshing, maddening, all rolled into one confusing package. Her thoughts drifted back to their earlier conversations, snippets of banter replaying in her mind like a favorite melody. Rylan's dry humor had caught her off guard, eliciting genuine laughter instead of polite chuckles. His insights, though occasionally crude, carried kernels of wisdom wrapped in earthy pragmatism. And those scars, Each told a story she found herself wanting to hear. But none of that excused the fact that she'd lost. To a human, no less. The shame burned hot in her cheeks, mingling with embarrassment and stubborn resolve. Fine. If fate, or bad luck, had decreed she must endure this humiliation, then so be it. She would face it with dignity, proving to everyone, including herself, that she was stronger than any bet or consequence. Besides, if nothing else, the experience promised to be educational. Hours passed in restless contemplation for both parties. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, Ryland decided to take matters into his own hands. Rising from his chair, he straightened his uniform, a subconscious gesture meant to bolster confidence, and prepared to seek out Ilera. Whatever lay ahead, avoiding it wouldn't make it disappear. With a deep breath, he stepped out of his cabin, heading toward the docking bay where a shuttle awaited to ferry him to the Zorathian flagship. Princess Ilera, meanwhile, donned her ceremonial robes, an act of defiance disguised as compliance. If she had to endure this indignity, she would do so on her terms, radiating poise and strength. As she adjusted the intricate clasps holding her garment together, she glanced at her reflection in the polished obsidian mirror lining her wall. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if perhaps she should simply call off the whole thing. Declare it null and void. After all, who would dare question her authority? But then she remembered Ryland's smirk as the simulation results flashed across the screen. That smug little grin haunted her now, fueling her determination. No, she wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. And so, with hearts pounding and minds racing, two unlikely adversaries prepared to meet once more, drawn together by forces beyond their control. Neither knew quite what to expect, but both braced themselves for whatever challenges, or revelations, awaited them in the days to come. The airlock hissed softly as Captain Ryland Drake stepped onto the gleaming deck of the Zorathian flagship, his boots clicking faintly against the polished floor. Before him stretched a corridor bathed in soft, golden light, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that shimmered like liquid metal. He paused for a moment, taking in the alien elegance surrounding him, before steeling himself to move forward. Every step felt deliberate, weighed down by the surreal nature of his mission. He was here to confront a princess, not with weapons or demands, but with humility and awkward uncertainty. It wasn't exactly the kind of negotiation he'd trained for. At the end of the corridor, a pair of towering Zorathian guards stood sentinel, their armor glinting ominously under the ambient glow. Their elongated limbs and angular features gave them an almost insectoid appearance, though their expressions remained stoic and unreadable. As Ryland approached, one of them tilted their head slightly, studying him with glowing amber eyes. Without uttering a word, they stepped aside, granting him passage into what appeared to be a grand receiving chamber. The space was vast, filled with floating orbs of light that cast dancing shadows across the walls. In the center stood Princess Ilera Valkyrin, resplendent in flowing robes that seemed to shimmer with every movement. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Ryland's breath caught in his throat as he took in her presence. She looked every bit the regal figurehead she was supposed to be, yet there was something softer about her today, less guarded perhaps, though still fiercely composed. Her violet eyes locked onto his, and for a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, with measured grace, she inclined her head ever so slightly in acknowledgement. "You're punctual, Captain," she said, her voice carrying a melodic cadence that somehow softened the edge of authority behind it. "I wasn't sure you'd show." Ryland swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze squarely. "Wouldn't miss it, Your Highness," he replied, injecting a note of levity into his tone despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "Figured I owed it to myself, and maybe the universe, to see this through." Ilera arched an eyebrow, her lips twitching upward in what might have been amusement, or disdain. Brave words for someone walking into unknown territory. "Well," Ryland countered, allowing a lopsided grin to break through his nervous facade, "if we're talking bravery, I think losing a bet to you takes more guts than anything I've done lately." That drew a genuine laugh from her, surprising even herself. The sound echoed softly in the cavernous chamber, breaking some invisible barrier between them. For the first time since their encounter, the tension eased, if only fractionally. Ilera gestured toward a nearby seating area, where low couches floated gently above the floor, defying gravity with effortless elegance. "Shall we discuss the details?" she asked, her tone shifting to something more pragmatic. "Or would you prefer to dive straight into whatever this entails?" Rylan hesitated, torn between eagerness to clarify the situation and reluctance to rush headlong into uncharted waters. Opting for caution, he followed her lead, settling onto one of the hovering seats. It wobbled slightly beneath his weight, prompting him to grip the edges instinctively. Ilara noticed and smirked, clearly amused by his discomfort. "To be honest, Your Highness," Rylan began, leaning forward slightly, "I'm not entirely sure what this means. Is it literal? Metaphorical? Some kind of cosmic punishment neither of us understands yet?" Ilara crossed her legs gracefully, resting her hands atop her lap. "Literal," she confirmed, her expression unreadable. "Though I suspect neither of us anticipated quite how literal it would feel." Rylan blinked, momentarily stunned. "Literal. Of course. Because why wouldn't it be?" His mind raced, trying to process the implications. Sharing a bed with an alien princess wasn't just awkward, it was practically a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. Yet, as he studied her face, he couldn't help noticing the flicker of vulnerability lurking beneath her poised exterior. She might be royalty, but she wasn't immune to nerves either. "So," he ventured cautiously, "does this mean we're expected to sleep in the same room? Or, is there a protocol I'm missing here?" Ilara sighed, brushing a strand of silvery hair away from her face. "Technically, yes. We'll share quarters for the duration of our agreement. However," she held up a finger, forestalling any further questions, "there are conditions. Boundaries. Neither of us needs to complicate matters unnecessarily." "Agreed," Rylan said quickly, relief washing over him. "Boundaries sound good. Necessary, even." They spent the next hour hashing out specifics, their conversation oscillating between serious deliberation and moments of unexpected camaraderie. Ilara explained the cultural significance of such arrangements in Zorathian society, emphasizing trust and mutual respect as cornerstones of the practice. Rylan listened intently, nodding along while occasionally interjecting clarifying questions. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their shared desire to navigate this bizarre scenario with dignity intact. By the time they finished discussing logistics, a tentative understanding had formed between them. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was a start. As they rose to leave the chamber, Rylan hesitated, turning back to address Ilara. "One last thing," he said, scratching the back of his neck sheepishly. "If I accidentally snore or hog the covers, you have my permission to kick me out of bed." "Deal." Ilara chuckled, shaking her head. "Deal. Though I reserve the right to use force if necessary." With that, they parted ways temporarily, each retreating to prepare for the evening ahead. Back in his assigned quarters aboard the flagship, Rylan unpacked his belongings with mechanical precision, his thoughts swirling chaotically. He couldn't shake the image of Ilara laughing earlier. The sound had been unexpectedly warm, disarming. It made her seem less like an untouchable princess and more like a person. Someone capable of joy and frustration, just like anyone else. Meanwhile, Ilara stood before her wardrobe, sifting through garments with a mixture of irritation and resignation. Choosing attire for such an unconventional arrangement felt oddly symbolic, as though her choice of clothing could somehow dictate the tone of the entire ordeal. Eventually, she settled on a simple yet elegant tunic paired with loose trousers, practical yet dignified. Satisfied, she turned her attention to the holoscreen displaying live updates from various sectors of the ship. Everything appeared calm, orderly. Yet beneath the surface, she sensed the subtle hum of anticipation rippling through the crew. News of their arrangement had undoubtedly spread, though no one dared comment openly. When the appointed hour arrived, Rylan found himself standing outside Ilara's quarters, heart hammering in his chest. He knocked lightly, the sound reverberating faintly against the doorframe. Moments later, it slid open to reveal Ilara, looking serene yet undeniably formidable. She stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. The room was breathtakingly beautiful, illuminated by soft bioluminescent panels embedded in the walls. A large, circular platform dominated the center, a sleeping area unlike anything Rylan had ever seen. It hovered slightly above the floor, supported by invisible energy fields that pulsed gently with a calming rhythm. "This is different," Rylan remarked, stepping closer to examine the setup. "No mattress, huh?" "It's designed for comfort and adaptability," Ilera explained, moving to stand beside him. "It adjusts based on body temperature and pressure points. You'll find it surprisingly restful." Rylan nodded, still marveling at the alien ingenuity. "Guess I'll take your word for it. Just promise me I won't float off into space during the night." Ilera smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth quirking upward. "I'll tether you if necessary." Their banter continued as they settled into the unfamiliar routine of sharing space. Rylan claimed one side of the platform, arranging his pillow with exaggerated care. Ilera mirrored his movements on the opposite side, maintaining a respectful distance. For several minutes, neither spoke, the silence punctuated only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. Finally, Rylan broke the quiet. "You know, this isn't how I imagined spending my evening." Ilera turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "Nor I mine. But perhaps that's the point. Sometimes, the best experiences come from stepping outside expectations." Rylan considered her words, nodding slowly. "Fair enough. Here's to unexpected adventures, then." "Indeed," Ilera murmured, closing her eyes. "Sleep well, Captain." As the lights dimmed and the room fell into soothing darkness, Rylan lay awake for a while longer, listening to the steady rhythm of Ilera's breathing. Despite the strangeness of their circumstances, he felt an odd sense of peace settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he realized, they wouldn't face them alone. Unbeknownst to either of them, the universe had other plans. Far beyond the confines of the flagship, whispers of unrest stirred among the stars. Shadows moved in the periphery of galactic politics, unseen forces gathering momentum like storm clouds on the horizon. The fragile equilibrium holding civilizations together teetered precariously, poised to tip at the slightest provocation. And somewhere within that delicate web, the bond forming between a human soldier and an alien princess became a thread neither could afford to sever. On the third night of their enforced cohabitation, Ilera and Rylan found themselves seated cross-legged on the hovering platform, surrounded by scattered datapads and holographic projections. The initial awkwardness of sharing quarters had begun to fade, replaced by a tentative camaraderie born of late-night conversations and shared meals. Tonight, however, the mood was different, charged with intensity as they pored over classified intel transmitted directly from Earth's Central Command. "They're calling it Operation Shadow Veil," Rylan explained, his voice low but urgent. He tapped a sequence on one of the pads, bringing up a map of a distant star system marked with ominous red zones. "Intelligence suggests rogue factions within the Krylos consortium are plotting to destabilize key trade routes. If they succeed, it could cripple supply lines for dozens of planets, including yours." Ilera frowned, her luminous eyes scanning the information displayed before her. "This doesn't align with typical Krylos tactics. They thrive on subtlety, not outright aggression. Something feels off." "That's what worries me," Rylan admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Whoever's pulling the strings isn't playing by the usual rules. Which means we can't either." For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Then Ilera leaned forward, her expression resolute. "We need to act quickly. My father's advisors will want proof before committing resources, but I can authorize reconnaissance missions discreetly. If we gather enough evidence, we might prevent escalation." Rylan nodded, appreciating her willingness to bypass bureaucratic red tape. "Good. Because time isn't on our side. These coordinates," he pointed to a cluster of blinking markers on the map, "are where the activity seems concentrated. If we deploy scout drones, we might catch them in the act." "And if they detect us?" Ilera asked, raising an eyebrow. "Then we improvise," Rylan replied with a wry grin. "Isn't that what we do best?" Despite the gravity of the task ahead, there was a spark of excitement in their exchange, a shared thrill at tackling challenges head-on. Over the next few hours, they coordinated strategies, blending human ingenuity with Zorathian technological prowess. By dawn, a plan had taken shape, a joint operation involving both Earth's fleet and select units from the Zorathian military. It was risky, unprecedented even, but necessity demanded boldness. As preparations unfolded, so too did moments of levity that helped ease the mounting tension. During one particularly grueling briefing session, Elara surprised everyone, including herself, by cracking a joke about Ryland's penchant for overly complicated contingency plans. The room erupted in laughter, breaking the monotony of charts and schematics. Later, while reviewing drone footage in the observation deck, Ryland attempted to teach Elara basic hand signals used by human soldiers. Predictably, hilarity ensued when she accidentally mimicked a signal meaning retreat instead of advance, prompting a chorus of chuckles from nearby crew members. Yet beneath the surface of camaraderie lay deeper currents of emotion neither fully acknowledged. One evening, as they reviewed progress reports in the privacy of Elara's quarters, Ryland noticed the faintest trace of exhaustion etched into her features. Setting aside his datapad, he reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said gently. "Take a break. Let the team handle this for a while." Elara stiffened slightly at the contact, unused to such displays of concern. But instead of pulling away, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. "I can't afford to stop, Ryland. Too much depends on getting this right." "I get that," he replied, his voice firm yet compassionate. "But burning yourself out won't help anyone. Trust me, I've been there." His words struck a chord, resonating with memories of battles fought and sacrifices made. Slowly, Elara relaxed, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Perhaps you're right," she conceded softly. "Just, not tonight. There's still work to do." Understanding her resolve, Ryland withdrew his hand, returning his focus to the task at hand. Yet the connection forged in that brief exchange lingered, weaving itself into the fabric of their partnership. Together, they navigated the complexities of leadership and loyalty, learning to lean on each other without compromising independence. Meanwhile, whispers of discontent rippled through the ranks. Not all were pleased with the burgeoning alliance between human and Zorathian forces. Traditionalists within the Empire viewed Elara's collaboration with suspicion, questioning her motives and allegiance. Similarly, factions within Earth's military hierarchy harbored doubts about trusting an alien regime, regardless of past treaties. Rumors circulated, fueled by fear and misinformation, threatening to undermine the fragile coalition they had built. One afternoon, as Ryland walked through the bustling corridors of the flagship, he overheard fragments of hushed conversations. Words like traitor and betrayal drifted past, sending a chill down his spine. Determined to address the issue, he sought out Elara later that evening, finding her in the ship's arboretum, a serene oasis filled with exotic flora and cascading waterfalls. "Elara," he began, his tone serious, "we've got a problem. People are talking. Some aren't happy about us working together." She turned to face him, her expression guarded yet unsurprised. "I know. I've heard the murmurs too. But dissent is inevitable when forging new paths. We cannot let it deter us." Ryland nodded, admiration swelling within him. "Still, we need to reassure them. Show them this isn't about personal gain, it's about survival. Unity. Then let's give them something tangible to believe in," Elara suggested, her eyes gleaming with determination. "A demonstration of strength and cooperation. Something undeniable." Thus, plans shifted once more, adapting to the evolving landscape of opinion and resistance. Under cover of darkness, they orchestrated a covert mission aimed at intercepting enemy communications. Utilizing cloaked vessels and cutting-edge stealth technology, teams from both sides infiltrated hostile territory, gathering critical intel while avoiding detection. The operation succeeded brilliantly, yielding encrypted messages that confirmed the existence of shadow operatives orchestrating the chaos. News of their triumph spread rapidly, silencing critics and rallying support. For the first time, humans and Zorathians stood united under a common banner, their combined efforts showcasing the potential of interspecies collaboration. Celebrations erupted across the fleet, marked by feasts, music, and heartfelt speeches extolling the virtues of unity. Amidst the jubilation, Ryland found himself reflecting on how far they'd come since that fateful bet. What had begun as a reluctant arrangement had blossomed into something profound, a testament to the power of trust and understanding. As he watched Elara deliver a rousing address to the assembled crew, pride shining in her eyes, he realized something fundamental had shifted within him. She wasn't just a princess or an ally anymore. She was someone he respected deeply, admired even. Someone he wanted to protect. And perhaps, though neither dared articulate it yet, someone he was beginning to care for in ways that transcended duty or obligation. The days following their successful counterintelligence mission brought a renewed sense of purpose to both Elara and Rylan. The atmosphere aboard the flagship buzzed with optimism, tempered only by the knowledge that greater challenges lay ahead. Intelligence reports indicated that the rogue faction responsible for destabilizing trade routes had regrouped, fortifying their position near a remote asteroid belt. Dubbed the Black Expanse, the region was notorious for its treacherous terrain and dense clusters of debris, making navigation perilous even for the most advanced vessels. Yet, it was clear that confronting the threat head-on was unavoidable. Preparations for the impending assault consumed every waking moment. Strategy sessions stretched late into the night, with Elara and Rylan poring over tactical maps and coordinating logistics with their respective teams. The operation, codenamed Ecliptica Strike, called for a multi-pronged approach. A decoy fleet would draw enemy forces into a vulnerable position, while elite strike teams, including both human marines and Zorathian warriors, would infiltrate the stronghold via cloaked shuttles. Precision and timing were paramount. Failure to execute flawlessly could result in catastrophic losses. As the launch date approached, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Elara's shoulders. Her role extended beyond battlefield strategy. She bore the burden of ensuring her people remained united despite rising dissent. Traditionalist factions within the Zorathian Senate had grown increasingly vocal, accusing her of prioritizing human interests over Zorathian sovereignty. Publicly, she maintained a stoic facade, addressing concerns with diplomatic finesse. Privately, however, doubt gnawed at her resolve. Was she doing enough? Could she truly bridge centuries of mistrust between species? Rylan noticed the strain etched into her features during one particularly grueling planning session. Leaning back in his chair, he observed her carefully, noting the subtle furrow of her brow and the tightness around her mouth. When the meeting adjourned, he lingered behind, waiting until the room emptied before approaching her. "You're carrying too much," he said quietly, his voice tinged with concern. "Let me help." Elara looked up, startled by the sincerity in his tone. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure whether to accept his offer. Then, with a weary sigh, she gestured for him to sit beside her. "It's not just the mission," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people, they don't trust me. Not completely. And I can't blame them. I've strayed so far from tradition, Rylan. Sometimes I wonder if I'm leading them astray." He listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "Change is scary," he acknowledged. "Especially when it challenges everything you've ever known. But you're not losing sight of who you are, Elara. You're redefining it. That takes courage." His words struck a chord, resonating with truths she'd buried beneath layers of duty and expectation. Slowly, she nodded, a flicker of gratitude lighting her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured. "I needed to hear that." Their bond deepened in those quiet moments, forged not through grand gestures but through shared vulnerability. It was a connection neither had anticipated, yet one that strengthened their resolve as leaders. Together, they faced the uncertainties ahead, drawing strength from each other's unwavering support. The eve of the operation arrived, casting a somber pall over the flagship. Crew members moved with quiet efficiency, finalizing checks and securing equipment. Morale remained high, bolstered by the recent successes achieved through collaboration. Still, an undercurrent of tension permeated the air, a reminder of the stakes involved. Lives hung in the balance, not just those of soldiers, but civilians dependent on stable trade routes for survival. In the hours leading up to deployment, Elara and Rylan retreated to her quarters, seeking solace in familiar surroundings. Hovering platforms hummed softly beneath their feet as they reviewed last-minute details, voices low and deliberate. Outside, stars streaked past the viewport like silver threads against black velvet, a silent testament to the vastness of the cosmos they sought to protect. "We're ready," Rylan declared finally, setting aside the datapad in his hands. As ready as we'll ever be. Ilera nodded, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula visible beyond the window. Yes. Ready to fight for something bigger than ourselves. Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken fears and hopes. Then, almost instinctively, Rylan reached out, covering her hand with his own. The gesture was simple yet profound, conveying a depth of emotion neither dared articulate aloud. Ilera turned to face him, her violet eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Promise me one thing," she whispered. "No matter what happens tomorrow, don't let go." "I won't," he vowed, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Not unless you do first." Moments later, alarms blared throughout the ship, shattering the fragile calm. Enemy scouts had detected their presence, forcing them to accelerate the timeline. Chaos erupted as crews scrambled to their stations. Orders barked over comms channels. Within minutes, Ilera and Rylan found themselves suited up and boarding separate vessels, their paths diverging as destiny dictated. The assault commenced with deafening fury, plasma bolts illuminating the darkness as fleets clashed amidst the jagged rocks of the asteroid belt. Cloaked shuttles slipped through enemy defenses, delivering strike teams to predetermined entry points. Inside the fortress, corridors echoed with the cacophony of battle, shouts, explosions, and the relentless hum of energy weapons. Human and Zorathian fighters fought side by side, their movements synchronized through months of training and shared experience. Ilera led her squad with fierce determination, her blade flashing in the dim light as she cut down adversaries with lethal precision. Beside her, Commander Vale, a seasoned Zorathian warrior, covered her flank, his loyalty unwavering. Meanwhile, Rylan spearheaded the human contingent, his tactical acumen guiding them through labyrinthine passageways toward the central command hub. Communication crackled intermittently between teams, updates relayed in clipped bursts. "Sector C secured," Ilera reported, her voice strained but resolute. "Proceeding to rendezvous point." "Copy that," Rylan replied, dodging a volley of fire. "We're 3 minutes out. Hold position." But fate had other plans. As Ilera's team neared the designated coordinates, a hidden ambush sent them sprawling. Reinforcements poured in from concealed alcoves, overwhelming their numbers. Desperation clawed at her throat as she realized retreat was impossible. "Fall back," she ordered, shielding her comrades with her own body. "Regroup." Simultaneously, Rylan's group encountered similar resistance, pinned down by relentless artillery. Smoke filled the air, obscuring vision and complicating maneuvers. Through gritted teeth, he issued commands, rallying his troops despite mounting casualties. "Hold the line," he shouted, firing blindly into the haze. "We push forward or die trying." Time blurred, each second stretching into eternity. Pain seared through muscles as exhaustion set in, yet neither leader faltered. They fought with every ounce of strength, driven by the knowledge that failure meant annihilation, for their teams, their people, and the fragile alliance they represented. Finally, after what felt like hours, reinforcements arrived. Allied ships breached the fortress perimeter, unleashing devastating salvos that decimated enemy ranks. The tide turned swiftly, momentum swinging in favor of the coalition. Exhausted but triumphant, Ilera and Rylan converged to the command hub, their reunion marked by a fierce embrace born of relief and pride. "We did it," Rylan gasped, clutching her tightly. "Against all odds." "Yes," Ilera breathed, clinging to him as though afraid he might vanish. "Together." Yet even as victory settled over them, questions lingered. Who had orchestrated the rogue faction's actions? What larger game was being played across the stars? And perhaps most importantly, what price would they pay for uncovering the truth? Far beyond the battlefield, shadowy figures watched events unfold with cold calculation. Hidden agendas shifted, pieces moved across an unseen board. The universe, vast and indifferent, held secrets darker than any battlefield could reveal. The aftermath of the battle left both Ilera and Rylan physically drained but emotionally fortified. The fortress had been secured, its systems dismantled to prevent further sabotage against interstellar trade routes. Yet, as they stood amidst the wreckage, smoke curling from shattered walls and debris littering the ground, they knew their victory was only a prelude to greater challenges. Intelligence recovered during the raid hinted at a deeper conspiracy, one that reached beyond rogue factions into the highest echelons of galactic power. Illyra's communicator buzzed insistently, pulling her attention away from the scene. It was Trainix, her trusted advisor, his holographic form flickering slightly as it materialized before her. "Your Highness," he began, his tone urgent, "we've intercepted encrypted transmissions pointing to involvement from within the Zorathian Senate. There are traitors among us." Her heart sank, though she showed no outward sign of shock. Instead, she straightened her posture, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "Send me the details," she instructed curtly. "And ensure this information remains classified. We cannot risk panic spreading." Rylan overheard the exchange and approached her, concern etched across his face. "Trouble?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "More than we bargained for," Illyra admitted, lowering her voice. "If there are traitors in my own government, then nothing is safe. Not our plans, not our alliances, not even—" She trailed off, glancing at him meaningfully. He nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "We'll handle it together. Like everything else." Their resolve solidified, they returned to the flagship to regroup and strategize. Over the next several days, evidence mounted implicating key members of the Zorathian Senate in collusion with external forces seeking to destabilize the Empire. Whispers of betrayal rippled through the corridors of power, testing the loyalty of allies and sowing discord among the populace. For Illyra, the revelation struck deeply. It wasn't just an attack on her leadership but on the very foundation of trust she'd worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, Earth's Central Command grew wary of escalating tensions. Some human officials questioned whether aligning too closely with the Zorathians might compromise their own security. Calls for withdrawal echoed louder, threatening to unravel the fragile coalition forged through blood and sacrifice. Rylan found himself caught between duty to his people and loyalty to Illyra, a conflict that weighed heavily on his conscience. One evening, as the two sat in her quarters reviewing classified documents, frustration boiled over. Illyra slammed a datapad onto the table, her usually composed demeanor cracking under the strain. "How can I protect them if they don't trust me? If you don't trust me?" Rylan looked up sharply, startled by the raw emotion in her voice. "That's not fair, Illyra. You know I trust you, with my life, with everything. But I have responsibilities too. My people are scared, unsure of where this alliance will lead them. And mine are dying because of lies and fear," she shot back, tears glistening in her violet eyes. "Do you think I wanted any of this? To gamble my crown, my future, on someone who might walk away when things get hard?" The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of energy fields sustaining the hovering platform beneath them. Neither moved, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Rylan rose from his seat, crossing the distance between them until he stood directly in front of her. Gently, he placed his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. "I'm not walking away," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. "Not now, not ever. Whatever comes next, we face it side by side. Together." His words broke something inside her, releasing the floodgates of emotions she'd kept locked away. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she leaned into him, allowing herself to be vulnerable for the first time in years. He held her close, murmuring reassurances, feeling the warmth of her body against his and realizing how much she meant to him, not just as a leader or ally, but as someone irreplaceable. In the days that followed, they devised a plan to expose the traitors while shoring up support for their alliance. Using decrypted communications and covert operatives, they gathered irrefutable proof of the Senate conspirators' treachery. Simultaneously, they launched a public campaign highlighting the successes of interspecies cooperation, showcasing stories of human Zorathian teamwork saving lives and preserving peace. Slowly but surely, skepticism gave way to cautious optimism, bolstered by tangible results. When the time came to confront the traitors, Illyra addressed the Senate in a historic session broadcast galaxy-wide. Standing tall in her ceremonial robes, she laid bare the evidence, naming names and demanding accountability. Her speech resonated with clarity and conviction, rallying those still loyal to her cause. By the end, applause erupted from the chamber, drowning out dissenting voices. As for Earth, Rylan personally delivered a report to his superiors, emphasizing the importance of maintaining ties with the Zorathians. His impassioned plea, coupled with undeniable evidence of shared victories, swayed opinions in favor of continued collaboration. Though not everyone agreed, enough support remained to sustain the alliance. With the immediate crisis averted, Ilera and Rylan turned their focus toward rebuilding, not just politically, but personally. They spent long nights talking about dreams deferred and aspirations yet unfulfilled. Ilera confessed her longing to see Earth someday, to experience humanity beyond diplomatic briefings. Rylan promised to show her everything, from bustling cities to quiet forests bathed in moonlight. In return, she invited him to explore Zorathia's wonders: crystalline oceans, floating cities, and ancient temples steeped in history. Their bond deepened, transcending titles and obligations. One evening, as they strolled along the observation deck of the flagship, hand in hand, Rylan stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Ilera," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "there's something I need to say." She tilted her head, curiosity lighting her eyes. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, he knelt before her, reaching into his pocket to retrieve a small, intricately carved ring, a token crafted from materials native to both Earth and Zorathia. "You've already given me more than I deserve," he said earnestly. "But if you'll have me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Ilera simply stared, stunned by the enormity of his proposal. Then, slowly, a radiant smile spread across her face. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him to his feet and into an embrace. 1,000 times yes. News of their engagement sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, sparking debates, celebrations, and endless speculation. Traditionalists balked at the idea of a human Zorathian union, while progressives hailed it as a symbol of hope for interspecies harmony. Through it all, Ilera and Rylan remained steadfast, drawing strength from each other and the love they shared. Their wedding took place aboard the flagship, surrounded by friends, family, and representatives from countless worlds. Stars twinkled outside the viewport as vows were exchanged, binding two souls and two civilizations, in a promise of unity and mutual respect. As they sealed their commitment with a kiss, cheers erupted, echoing through the vast expanse of space like a cosmic symphony. In the years that followed, their partnership became a beacon of progress, inspiring others to bridge divides and forge connections once thought impossible. Challenges remained, of course. The universe was never without its share of conflicts. But together, Ilera and Rylan faced them head-on, proving time and again that love could conquer even the starkest differences. And so, what began as a bet born of pride and chance blossomed into something far greater, a legacy of courage, compassion, and enduring connection. Underneath the endless skies of eternity, Captain Rylan Drake and Princess Ilera Valkyrin stood united, not just as husband and wife, but as pioneers of a brighter, boundless future.